Hello and welcome back to another episode of the ICIS Energy Foresight podcast. As always, we're trying to change and experiment with different formats and content. And this episode is going to be slightly different compared to our usual pod. There's a lot happening in the market, and we thought it would be useful to try to slow things down and draw some lines in the sand to understand where the energy market is going and how the whole geopolitical mess unfolding in front of our eyes could impact market fundamentals on one side and expectations on the other side. But let me jump straight into it. So we're going to touch upon three main areas and try to read through the main events using two different lenses. The story on one side, story that we can draw or can be derived, and statistics, so using game theory and other tools of decision theory. The three main areas which are closely linked to one another are the Ukrainian peace deal negotiation and its impact on the European gas market and the energy market. The new wave of policy measures that are coming out of Brussels. And lastly, what nobody is talking about, but that could potentially destabilize the European energy market. Methane regulation and its impact on the US LNG supply. But let's start from some basics and let's try to define the two main concepts that we will use in this podcast: risk and uncertainty. So risk is something that we can somehow quantify and work with. The famous economist Frank Knight defined it as a case where the distribution of outcome in a group of instances is known. Uncertainty, on the other hand, is not easily quantifiable because the situation that we deal with is in a high degree quite unique. And if we want to use, the famous Donald Rumsfeld's analogy of known knowns and known unknowns and so on, we can say that risk is probably definable as known knowns, while uncertainty plays at the intersection of unknown knowns and known unknowns. If we look at the Ukrainian peace negotiation process and we start from the story, the narrative that is unfolding would suggest that the new US administration is eager to get to a ceasefire as early as possible, and it's willing to force Ukraine to get a compromise with Russia, accepting some of the requests the Kremlin would make. Europe has been sidelined so far and seems to be willing to support Ukraine in the negotiation process and not compromise yet. But given how quick the US administration is moving, which we have seen just very recently in how quick they altered the delivery of military equipment and suspended intelligence support, the US seems to have an edge over Europe in steering the direction of the peace negotiation. This is creating buzz in the energy market, and it's seen as a bearish signal for the gas market. A ceasefire could effectively reopen gas flows from Russia into Europe, both via pipelines, with rumors that go as far as imagining the reopening of Nord Stream 2, and via LNG. And Arctic LNG, obviously, is the first candidate on the list. The effect on the European gas market was felt last week when TTF crashed from 57 euros down to 37 euros, dragging down the whole energy complex, with carbon allowances tumbling down below 70 from over 83 euros. The story here is a story of men that are playing a different game compared to the game that was played till the end of 2024. And the market believes this new story may actually end up in a ceasefire or a peace deal relatively soon. Now, if we look at it from a game theory perspective, we have 4 different players, and we can say that each player has at least 2 strategies. and at least two value factors, or two different utilities, a high utility and a low utility, and a value driver or a set of value drivers. The key in navigating through risk and uncertainty becomes the ability to assess probabilities and payoffs linked to different strategies and to the combination of those different strategies. Effectively, decision theory takes over what optimization does under normal circumstances. So I won't scan through all the different strategies, and for simplicity and for the sake of time, I will jump straight to the conclusion of this game theory exercise. You can see directly in the slides what are the different combinations. But the optimal joint outcome of this exercise is the one where the US adopt a multilateral approach strategy. Europe goes for what we can call it a flexible diplomacy strategy, while Russia accepts to minimize costs. So interesting enough, if we have probabilities to each combination, this outcome has a lower probability compared to others, which they have a lower overall payoffs. So at the moment, we can conclude that the most likely outcome keeps being a continuation of the conflict, which will effectively keep eating up the European gas market and reignite bullish pressures on the TTF, especially when we enter the storage refilling season. A perfect segue to the second topic on the list, the new wave of policy proposals coming out of Brussels. After the first REPowerEU, the new Commission seems to like the brand and has recently announced the ReArmEU, a new package of roughly 800 billion euros that will go into defense investments. This might not be strictly relevant for the energy market, but at the same time, a new wave of proposals came out of Brussels that may affect the energy market. The Affordable Energy Act, which is part of the other communication, which is called the Clean Industrial Act, and the storage regulation. And while the Affordable Energy Act and the Clean Industrial Act are both very extensive and will probably need a few episodes, so I'd rather skip them for now, the storage regulation, or the amendment to the gas storage regulation, is something that is definitely nearer term, and will impact the market over the coming months, because the Commission has effectively proposed to extend the storage regulation until the end of 2027, so requiring natural gas storage facility to be at least 90% full by the 1st of November of each year until 2027, which is effectively the year when the global gas market is expected to be long or oversupplies. The extension aims to ensure continuous security of energy supply across the EU, while at the same time try to relax interim targets and give storage operators and shippers some element of flexibility to limit the effect of any possible distortion arising from it. The question everybody is asking is, at what price will Europe be able to meet the storage target this year? At the moment, just for sake of when we are recording this episode, the European storage sites are at 37% fullness, and we expect Europe to end the winter season at around 35%. So the story that is popular on the market takes inspiration from what happened in 2022, when Europe ended the winter season with storage fullness at roughly 26%, and gas prices reached record highs, topping above 300 euros during the summer on the back of the need to refill storage sites. That was supported by a set of measures that different European countries put in place, from minimum volume in gas storage to obligations imposed on designated entities and financial incentives. This story is reflected into the negative 2025 winter-summer spread, which has brought TTF prices up to above 55 euros a few weeks ago, and which is effectively a price configuration that doesn't incentive storage operators to inject gas during the summer, which is obviously the usual time period of the year where storage gets filled. This is a clear a clear sign that market players are anticipating, and they're trying to take advantage of it. We can apply a game theory approach again and simplify the game with just two players, the EU governments and gas market operators. And again, for simplicity, we can say that EU governments have just three strategies: status quo, relax targets, and adopt a set of measures as in 2022, while gas market operators have just two strategies: either they comply or they defect and pay fines. So a simpler matrix with different payoffs. And again, I'll just jump straight to the conclusion. It's clear that the optimal equilibrium is again reached in the case where multiple measures are put in place and gas operators comply with those measures. It is therefore likely to expect that traders and market players will keep igniting the gas market over the coming months, even though the new gas storage regulation relaxes some of the interim targets and introduces some extra flexibility. But market players have an inner incentive in factoring in the need for governments to step in with more measures that would guarantee meeting storage targets. But if we go back to the initial known unknown matrix, if the gas storage conundrum is a classic example of known, and the Ukrainian ceasefire can be ascribed as a known unknown, out of the two remaining boxes, probably the interesting one is the unknown known, which is the perfect example of that is the European methane regulation and its impact on the European gas supply. So in 2024, the European Union finally approved its methane emission regulation, which aims at stopping the release of methane into the atmosphere, both in the EU and in its global supply chains. A major partner of the EU, and especially on the gas side, is the US. Europe's reliance on US LNG keeps increasing, and the methane regulation seems to be incompatible with the new US administration, especially with Trump drill baby drill policy. Why? Because the regulations will effectively impose fines on gas importers that don't meet new monitoring and emissions requirements set by the EU. However, the EU has not yet designed those limits or determined how other countries should be considered equivalent to the internal regulation. So at the moment, what is happening is that the EU is effectively expected to penalize importers starting in 2027 that don't comply with those resource-intensive requirements, that do not have investments in monitoring and repairing leaks of methane that is emitted during the production, storage, and transport of natural gas. That means effectively the EU could prompt fines on US exporters. And this is obviously a major issue right now, which has prompted European Commission officials to fly to the US and meet with LNG industry representatives in the US. These exchanges are taking place alongside trade talks between EU officials and the Trump administration, which has threatened to impose high tariffs if Europe doesn't relent on numerous demands, including buy more US LNG. Another perfect case where game theory can help frame the problem and anticipate future outcomes. Again, let's simplify it and assume there are just three players: Europe, the US administration and US LNG producers. Each player has like two strategies. Europe can go for keep enforcing strictly the methane regulation or try to negotiate some flexibility elements in that. The US administration can keep being very receptive to that and deregulate fully or support voluntary compliance, while US LNG producers can either decide to comply or simply ignore the regulation. Again, we have different payoffs, different probabilities, and I will jump straight to the conclusion, which is the optimal case, the optimal outcome of these game theory exercises, the one where Europe energy needs and Trump's export focus are both met. So Europe is likely to opt from some sort of negotiated flexibility, where US LNG producer will partially comply with that. This would balance long-term climate objectives that the US with short-term needs in terms of energy security. However, another unknown can flip this further, which is Trump's tariff threats. So we have reached the end of this episode, and in general, I think the exercise that we have carried on highlights how, for example, Europe methane rules and US deregulation create a tense yet interdependent game, with voluntary compliance emerging as a critical pivot for stability. As we always say, Energy Foresight primary goal is to understand where there are gaps between the price we see on the market and its value. This is commonly called variant perception or edge. And while price is relatively straightforward, assessing value can be a challenge. That's where applying the optimization and combining it with game theory, probabilities, and payoffs becomes quite an interesting exercise. I hope that you find it useful and interesting. And as always, if you want to know more about Energy Foresight, please visit our website, icis.com, or just reach out. Till the next time.